This image is a really nicely composed street elevation. It's a little more solid than it is open, which talks about the level of privacy. Yet it's not disconnected from the street. I think it has a really nice composition from the street elevation.
It's a very satisfying home. It's quiet. It's simple. It's kind of elegant. It's sort of beautifully understated.
Has a simple material palette that adds to this quietness that Larry's talking about, and it's quietly shifting lines on this street elevation are just wonderful.
One thing that I really liked about it is the shape of the house allows you to kind of look out of the house into the exterior space and then back across that space back into the house. So it really feels more like a pavilion on the landscape, and the openness is really strong, and the strong sort of horizontal line and open plan. It's again a very elegant, simply stated home that's really rich in material.
That entrance really says it all. You're not stopping here, you're just lighting the landscape.
A very permeable indoor and exterior connection. There's a couple of spots in the building where it feels like it's sort of seamless, moving in interior and exterior. Probably more glass than there is other sort of solid materials, and it's beautiful.
We often overlook really good historic renovations or rebuilds, one that had been altered over time, and frankly the way that the designers handled this, it looks spectacular. It looks almost like original condition, really exquisitely detailed throughout it.
I really respect the architect and client for resisting the impulse to add many of the accoutrements of modern or comfortable living, and just quietly let the authenticity of this house breathe.
John Byer's house, very well known Southern California architect who did a lot of work, and here's a great example of his early work, and the restoration, renovation looks like it was done extremely carefully with a very high level of sensitivity to the original piece of architecture.
I thought it was a pretty fantastic project. On the surface it looks like a classical Santa Barbara mission project, but when you look closer it's really more Mannerist than Santa Barbara. The shape of the tower, it's a bit bizarre. It's the composition of the facade, very asymmetrical, non-classical.
I love the architect's reliance on natural light and the naturally lit voluminous spaces on the interior will really naturally, it improves the experience of traveling.
It feels a more sort of traditional way of entering an airport in a small city. Spatially, it's very interesting. I think it would be a great place to fly in and out of.
This was a really interesting project, clearly different, and the designer tried not to make their project spread throughout the entire existing house. It was a very constrained, limited project, and it was very sensitive in how it connected to the existing house.
It's such a quiet, simple counterpoint to the existing house and makes you respect the existing house more, while at the same time being a strong addition itself.
You can't bust this house open and do all these wild and crazy things, so you better figure out how to do this in the simplest, cleanest way possible and have it become part of the backyard. The first images were so captivating. The simplicity of the use of materials, the restrained hand by the architect, the execution of opening up the building to these incredible views, extremely well executed, beautiful project.
Yeah, what struck me was the use of the windows, or the corner window, and how what was a very narrow, constrained site really opened the views and made the spaces really kind of feel part of the great ocean view and environment. So even though it was on a higher level, it really felt like it was one with its environment and its surroundings.
It's so restrained. Even though people will be talking about the views, how it handled this long, narrow lot is just perfect. And these simple forms that are perfectly executed.
The strength of this home for me was the idea of these very low-slung horizontal and vertical planes that sort of hug the landscape or hug the horizon line, and they create both indoor and outdoor spaces. So there's kind of a variety or modulation between in and out and courtyards and interior space, all formed by these vertical and horizontal planes.
I was just taken by the kind of entry elevation, very low slung, elegant piece that appears to have some natural stone involved, glass. It just feels like the right kind of building on the right on a site which is so pristine.
I normally don't support such large buildings on large lots. It really retains its greatest asset.
This house is a perfect example of a really timeless piece of architecture.
The really interesting part was this light well that's cut into the building, and then the insertion of exit stairs to the building brought the building to life. They're kind of like these little follies kind of bring a massive building to life with just very small interventions spread around the whole perimeter of the building.
Talk about bringing a dead zone back to life. Just these simple intercessions and a couple of bright colors, punctuating spaces, and creating some energy and tension.
Pulling the plug out of the middle of the building to make it an entry and give the entry some importance seemed like a really, really intelligent move. And getting some light into this building, I think will bring the interior spaces back to life again.
This, to me, was a really interesting project. It was an existing building, probably done in the 50s, 60s, somewhere in that early modernist period. But the way that the designer gave this new life by sort of recladding or putting a second skin around the building really is quite beautiful, and it's a very interesting, just a simple kind of play of metal. Kind of use of color was also quite nice. It's felt very vibrant and alive building type.
Even more than the skin, I love how they're working to puncture the the walls to create some energy and depth.
It certainly will be transformed from its current state into something that's really pretty wonderful.
What initially struck me was this kind of perforated skin on the lower level is really beautiful textured material. And then when you look at this is very subtle. The beauty is kind of in the detailing, the simplicity, the kind of planes that are arranged on the house. It feels like kind of a wrapper piece floating over the house.
Well, what's really interesting to me about this house, these alternate rhythms of transparency and opaqueness. But even more than that, when I start thinking about what they're doing inside the house and how they're creating private space in the house and allowing public space and interaction with the environment and how that all works, it's actually much more complex than it looked.
What struck me was the arrival, this sort of sequence of arrival. It's so beautiful, this highly kind of articulated and fenestrated wall on that first level.
Let's drop!